I'm Liam, 34 years old. For a long time, I thought I had it all figured out. Solid career, beautiful wife, nice house in the suburbs, the whole damn 9 yards. Turns out, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. This whole nightmare started about 6 months before my wife, Evelyn, decided to drop the atomic bomb on our marriage. We were together for 4 years, married for 1. And I swear to God, those first few years were like something out of a movie. Evelyn, 36, well, she was everything. The sweetest person you've ever met dialed up to 11. She was the queen of surprise dates, leaving little love notes in my lunch bag, just being incredibly thoughtful about every damn thing. She'd whip up these amazing, home-cooked meals after I had a brutal day at work. Remember every freaking anniversary, even the stupid ones, like the first time we watched that terrible rom-com. I'm not kidding, Reddit. She was perfect. Everyone we knew, our friends, her family, even random acquaintances, used to tell us we were relationship goals. We were disgustingly happy, I guess. And honestly, it felt that way. We barely even had fights. Just the normal couple bickering about who left the toilet seat up or who was supposed to take out the trash. Nothing major. I thought we were solid. Unbreakable, even. I was an idiot. Then, slowly, subtly, things started to change. Like a slow leak in a tire, you don't really notice it until you're stranded on the side of the road with a flat. It started with our finances. Now, I work in finance, so I've always handled the money stuff. Evelyn never really showed much interest. She trusted me, and frankly, she didn't need to worry. I wasn't blowing cash on stupid stuff or keeping secrets. I busted my ass to make sure she was comfortable, that she never had to stress about bills or rent. If she wanted something, she got it. No questions asked. She had access to everything, anytime. I was transparent. But then, out of nowhere, she starts grilling me. Not the usual, hey, should we start saving more kind of thing. No! This was intense, laser-focused scrutiny. She was asking super specific questions about all our accounts, our investments, even stuff from before we got married. Stuff she had never, ever given a damn about. I remember one night, we were having dinner, and she just randomly brings up my inheritance from my grandparents. Wants to know exactly how it's stored, what it's invested in, the whole 9 yards. I asked her why she was suddenly so interested, and she just shrugged it off. Oh, I just think I should know these things. We're married, after all. That set off the first tiny alarm bell in my head. Then came the phone calls. She'd be in the kitchen or the living room, whatever. Phone rings, and suddenly she's darting into another room and closing the door. I'm not the jealous type. I'm really not. But this was different. She never used to do that. And when she'd come back, if I asked who it was, she'd always give some vague, non-committal answer. Oh, just work stuff, or just catching up with an old friend. The late nights at work started piling up too. She's a project manager at a tech company, so late nights aren't completely unheard of. But it went from maybe once a month to 2, then 3 times a week. And here's the thing that really bothered me. I checked our shared credit card statement because I'm the one who always handles the bills. And guess what? No charges for dinner on those late nights. So either she was eating the world's longest series of packed lunches, or something wasn't adding up. The lunches were adding up. But the real red flag, the one that made me sit up straight and pay attention, was the online banking. She started obsessively checking our accounts, like multiple times a day. I only noticed because I work at a bank and our system shows login activity. She'd never checked it more than maybe once a month before, usually just to make sure her paycheck went through. Now, I didn't want to be that guy. You know, the paranoid husband who reads into every little thing and makes mountains out of molehills. But I've worked in finance long enough to know that when someone suddenly gets that interested in money and accounts, something's usually up. It's like when clients start asking, weirdly specific questions about their accounts. 9 times out of 10, they're planning something. So I started paying closer attention to other things too, like how she'd get really quiet whenever I talked about future plans. We were supposed to go on this big, extravagant vacation for our 2nd anniversary. And every time I brought it up, she'd change the subject or give really non-committal answers. Don't even get me started on how she reacted when I mentioned maybe thinking about starting to try for kids soon. It was like I'd suggested we adopt a family of rabid squirrels. The weirdest part? She started getting really interested in my work schedule. Wanted to know exactly when I'd be home, when I had late meetings, that kind of thing. At first, I thought maybe she was planning some kind of surprise. Our anniversary was coming up, but something about it just felt off. So I started keeping a note on my phone. Not in a creepy, stalker kind of way, just dates and basic details. Part of my job is looking for patterns in data, and man, when I looked at that note after a few weeks, the pattern was pretty damn clear. Something was definitely up. I know some of you are probably reading this thinking, dude, she was obviously cheating. And yeah, maybe that thought crossed my mind. But honestly, my gut was telling me it was something else. The focus on finances, the sudden interest in my schedule and our accounts. It felt more calculated than that. Like one night, she brought it up again over dinner. Hey, how exactly does your 400 wonk work? Like, what happens if something happens to you? Who gets it? She poked at her pasta like the question was totally casual. I set my fork down. Why do you keep asking about this stuff lately? I tried to keep my tone light, but I could feel my chest tightening. Did I do something? Are you upset about something? She barely looked up. No, I just think we should be more prepared, in case life throws something unexpected our way. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. I actually couldn't ignore my gut anymore. So, I decided to do something that still makes me feel kind of guilty, even though it ended up saving my ass. I started quietly protecting myself. Yeah, I know how that sounds. Like I was being paranoid or didn't trust my wife. Trust me, I spent many sleepless nights feeling like the worst husband ever for even thinking about this stuff. But here's the thing about working in finance, you see people get screwed over all the time because they didn't protect themselves. I can't count how many times I've had clients come in devastated because they trusted someone completely and got burned. So I figured, better safe than sorry, right? First thing I did was document everything. And I mean everything. Every gift we'd ever given each other, we actually exchanged plenty of gifts over the years that held substantial value. Every major purchase, every joint account, every investment. I even went through our wedding gifts and made a detailed list. Probably looked like a crazy person with all these spreadsheets, but whatever. Then I did something that honestly felt really sneaky at the time. I opened a separate account at a different bank. Not to hide money or anything shady like that, just to have something that was completely mine. I moved my personal inheritance from my grandparents into it, about $50,000. Since that was technically separate property anyway, I also started keeping all my receipts and taking photos of expensive stuff we owned. Like, I literally went around the house one day when she was working late and photographed every valuable thing we had, especially the stuff we'd given each other as gifts. Felt like I was doing some weird insurance inventory or something, LOL. The trickiest part was figuring out what to do about our joint investments. We had this portfolio we'd built together, and she'd never shown any interest in it before. But suddenly, she's asking all these questions about when we could liquidate certain positions and what the penalties would be for early withdrawal. So, I started slowly, very slowly, moving my personal contributions into more secure positions. Again, nothing illegal or shady, just protecting what was mine to begin with. There was this one day that really confirmed I was doing the right thing. She came home from work all excited about this great investment opportunity one of her work friends had told her about. Started talking about how we should maybe cash out some of our long-term investments for it. When I asked for details, she got super vague and defensive. Red flag city, right? I also started paying more attention to our spending patterns. She'd always been pretty good with money, not a big spender or anything. But I noticed she'd started making a lot of small withdrawals from our joint account. Nothing huge that would raise immediate red flags, but when I added it all up, let's just say it was eye-opening. The whole time I was doing all this, I felt like such a dick. Here I was, a supposedly loving husband, basically preparing for everything to go to hell. Some nights I'd lie awake thinking maybe I was just being paranoid and creating problems that weren't there. But then she'd do something else. Ask weirdly specific questions about our savings, wonder out loud what divorce settlements usually look like, or casually bring up how her friend got totally screwed over in her split. And suddenly, I didn't feel so paranoid anymore. I even started keeping a record of when she was working late, or taking those mysterious phone calls. Just dates and times in a password-protected note on my phone. Not in a stalker way, but you know how sometimes you just need to prove you're not crazy? Yeah, that kind of thing. The hardest part was acting normal through all of this. Like, imagine sitting across from someone at dinner, laughing and talking about normal stuff, while you're also low-key preparing for them to potentially screw you over. It's exhausting, honestly. Every time she'd do something sweet or normal, I'd feel guilty all over again. I actually did try to talk to her about it, many times. Asked if something was on her mind, if there was anything we needed to talk about. But she just brushed it off, acted like I was imagining things, gave me nothing. And honestly, pushing harder would have just made her more careful about whatever she was up to. Sometimes the smartest move isn't confronting, it's shutting up and paying attention. Quick side note, some of you might be thinking, dude, why didn't you just get marriage counseling or something? Well, one actually suggested it once, kind of casually. You should have seen how fast she shot that idea down. Said we were fine and I was just being insecure. Classic gaslighting, right? Then everything unraveled. One Tuesday morning, those moments that change your life forever, they never happen how you expect. No dramatic thunderstorm. No ominous music playing in the background. Just a regular Tuesday. I was sitting at our kitchen island, having my usual coffee and scrolling through work emails on my phone. She was making toast, and I remember thinking how weird it was that she was up early since she usually slept in on her WFH days. Then, she just did it. Pulled out this manila envelope from her work bag and slid it across the counter to me, like she was passing me the morning paper or something. I didn't even look at it at first. Thought maybe it was just some house paperwork or whatever, but then I saw her face. She had this weird expression I'd never seen before, kind of blank but also satisfied. That's when I knew. I want a divorce, she said, super calm, like she was telling me we needed more milk from the store. I remember my coffee cup just hanging there, halfway to my mouth, probably looking like a complete idiot. The crazy thing is, even though I'd been preparing for something bad to happen, this still felt like getting slapped in the face. I opened the envelope. Yep, divorce papers, all filled out, just waiting for my signature. She'd clearly been planning this for a while. Probably already talked to a lawyer and everything. And there I was, still in my pajama pants, trying to process what the hell was happening. You know what's really messed up? My first thought wasn't even about our marriage ending. It was, thank God I moved that inheritance money. How screwed up is that? 4 years together, and in that moment, all I could think about was being glad I'd protected my assets. She started giving me this rehearsed speech. I don't know. I'm not in love anymore. People grow apart, you know. It happens. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. She wouldn't look at me. Just last night, she was curled up against me on the couch, laughing at some dumb Netflix show. And now? Now she was sitting here, feeding me the most generic breakup speech imaginable. I let her talk. Didn't interrupt, didn't react. probably looked stunned. But inside, my brain was running through a mental checklist. Separate account? Check. Documentation of assets? Check. Photos of valuables? Check. It was like my emotions got shoved into a corner while my survival instincts took over. When she finished, she just sat there watching, waiting for some kind of explosion. Instead, I took a slow sip of my now cold coffee, set it down, and said, "Okay." Her expression was priceless. Like I'd just thrown a wrench in whatever reaction she was expecting. She blinked, scowled. "That's it? Okay?" I shrugged. She scoffed. "You're not even going to ask why?" I exhaled. "Is it because I didn't give you what you deserved, or because I wasn't giving enough in this relationship?" Her face shifted, surprise, then something else. Something unreadable. "No," she said, shaking her head. "It's not that. You were good to me. I don't know. I don't think I want to be in a marriage anymore. I don't want to be committed like this." That was an answer, but not really. Not one that made sense, anyway. And it confirmed what I already knew. There was more to this than she was saying. I let the silence stretch between us before finally saying, "I'll have my lawyer look over the papers." For a split second, there was panic in her eyes. Just a flicker, before she masked it. "Oh, you, already have a lawyer?" Yeah, I forced a smile and tried to act unbothered. "Great. That's great. I mean, no need to make this harder than it has to be, right?" "Yeah, sure. I'm sure that's the real reason she's in such a hurry." Red flag number 478. I felt nothing in the moment, just cold, detached. But that conversation stuck with me, echoing in the back of my mind long after it was over. The rest of that morning was surreal. She went to work in her home office, while I sat there at the kitchen counter staring at these papers that were basically saying, "Hey, your life as you know it is over." Then I did what any rational person would do. I called in sick to work and started making phone calls. First to my lawyer, thank God I'd already quietly consulted one. Then to my bank to double-check all my accounts were secure. The weirdest part? We still had dinner together that night. Like, who does that? Sits down to eat chicken stir-fry with someone who literally served them divorce papers that morning? But there we were, eating in this super awkward silence, both pretending this was somehow normal. I went to bed that night in our guest room. My choice. Needed space to think. Lying there looking at the ceiling, trying to figure out what her end game was. Because this whole thing, the way she did it, something wasn't adding up. The divorce itself went surprisingly smoothly, probably because I didn't contest anything. I mean, what's the point of fighting to keep someone who clearly doesn't want to stay? I kept the house, bought her out, and we split our joint accounts. Basic divorce stuff. But then things got weird. Like really weird. 2 weeks after the settlement was finalized, she just disappeared. And I don't mean like, "Oh, she's not returning my calls," disappeared. I mean gone. Completely off the grid. At first, I didn't even notice because, we were divorced. Why would I keep tabs on her? But then her friend, Kate, started calling me. Turns out, Evelyn had quit her job, just walked in one day, handed in her resignation, and left. No 2 weeks notice, no explanation, nothing. Her boss called me. We'd had dinner with him and his wife a few times, asking if everything was okay. I remember standing in my kitchen, thinking, why the hell would I know? We're literally divorced. Her best friend, Kate, called me in tears because, apparently, my ex had blocked her on everything. Not just social media, but her phone number, email, everything. And it wasn't just Kate, she'd blocked everyone. Her entire friend group, co-workers, even her yoga instructor, who she'd been going to for like 3 years, reached out to me, trying to figure out what was going on. So I started doing some digging. Yeah, I know, I probably should have just stayed out of it. Her phone was disconnected. Her social media accounts? All deleted. Not just deactivated, but full-on deleted. She'd even closed her email accounts. It was like she was trying to erase herself from existence. The really messed up part was that her friends were genuinely worried something had happened to her. Like, they thought maybe she was in trouble or something. They kept calling me, but I told them I have nothing to do with her anymore. Her brother, Mike, who I used to be pretty tight with, wouldn't answer any of my calls. Neither would her parents, which was extra weird because her mom and I got along great. She used to call me her bonus son and everything. But now? Radio silence. Obviously they knew something, but they weren't sharing. About a month into her disappearance, I found out she'd also closed all her local bank accounts. Not transferred, but closed. The bank manager, small town, everyone knows everyone, mentioned it casually when I was there dealing with some paperwork. Said she'd come in, closed everything out, and left with a cashier's check. Wouldn't tell them where she was going. The weirdest part of all this? I wasn't even that surprised. Shocked, yeah, but not surprised. It's like all those months of weird behavior had been leading up to this grand finale. The questions about our finances, the late-night phone calls, the sudden interest in my schedule. She'd been setting this up for months. Her friends eventually gave up trying to find her. What else could they do? She clearly didn't want to be found. But man, the theories never stopped. Every time I ran into one of them around town, they'd have some new idea about where she went or what she was doing. I tried to move on with my life. I mean, what else could I do? I had a house to maintain, a job to focus on, a life to live. And eventually, I did forget her. Or at least, I thought I did. I got everything figured out. I am finally sleeping through the night without waking up stressed. Around 5 months after the whole vanishing act, I was actually doing pretty good. Started hitting the gym regularly. Yeah, I know, typical divorce guy move, got a promotion at work, and even started dating again. Her name is Brittany. She's a pediatric nurse at the local children's hospital. And honestly, she's the complete opposite of my ex. All sunshine and bubbles and pink scrubs with little unicorns on them. We met when I was grabbing coffee at this little place near my office. She literally bumped into me and spilled her strawberry frappuccino all over both of us. Rom-com level meet cute, right? After apologizing like 50 times and insisting on paying for my dry cleaning, which I refused, she gave me her number. We started texting and it just clicked. So yeah, life was getting good. Brittany and I are officially dating, I'm killing it at work, and I'm enjoying life again. Then, boom. Guess who shows up at my door at 9:00 p.m. on a random Thursday? Yep, the ghost herself. My ex-wife, Evelyn. The timing couldn't have been worse. Brittany was over. We were making cookies and watching some Netflix show about baking. I know. So domestic. I hear this aggressive knocking, and when I open the door, there's my ex, looking like she'd been through hell and back. First thing out of her mouth? Whose car is that in the driveway? Not hello, not even, hey, can we talk? Nope. She's fixated on Brittany's white Volkswagen Beetle, complete with a flower vase, yes, really parked next to my car. I tell her it's my girlfriend's car, and holy shit, the look on her face. It was like I just told her I'd sold our house to a pack of wolves. She goes from looking desperate to straight up furious in about half a second. But here's where it gets really wild. Instead of talking about where she's been for the past 5 months or why she's suddenly shown up at my door, she starts going off about how fast I moved on. Like, excuse me, you disappeared without a trace after blindsiding me with divorce papers, and you're mad that I'm dating someone? I can hear Brittany in the kitchen, probably wondering what's going on, and the whole situation is just surreal. My ex is standing there in my doorway, looking like a mess, ranting about how I clearly never loved her if I could move on so quickly. Then she spots Brittany coming to check on me. Brittany, sweet soul that she is, actually waves and says hi with her typical cheerful smile. My ex takes one look at her and lets out this bitter laugh. She turns back to me and goes, "Really? This is your type now? Some basic Barbie who bakes cookies?" That's when I got pissed. "Look," I said, stepping forward, "you can come at me all you want. But Brittany, she's literally the nicest person I've ever met. She volunteers at animal shelters on weekends and cries during Disney movies. Going after her was crossing a line." But before I could say anything else, my ex switched gears completely. Suddenly, she's not interested in Brittany anymore. No, now she wants to talk about money. Specifically, all the expensive jewelry and stuff she gave me during our marriage. The whiplash from, "How dare you move on," to "Where's my stuff?" was insane. I'm standing there trying to process this mood swing while Brittany's quietly retreated back to the kitchen. Bless her heart. She later told me she started stress baking a second batch of cookies. I tell my ex I sold most of it after the divorce and donated the rest to charity, which was true. It was part of my whole fresh start thing. Man, if I thought she was mad before, she completely lost it. Started calling me names, saying I had no right to sell her gifts, demanding I give her the money. The whole time she's yelling, I'm just standing there thinking how strange life is. 5 months ago, this woman was my wife. We shared a bed, a life, everything. Now, she's a stranger screaming on my doorstep while my new girlfriend's stress bakes in the kitchen. I ended up closing the door in her face mid-rant. Probably not the most mature response, but hey, she lost the right to yell at me in my own house when she served me divorce papers over breakfast. I went back to the kitchen. Brittany just looked at me, handed me a warm cookie, and said, "So, that was interesting. God, I love how she can make even the most awkward situations better." But something told me this wasn't over. The way my ex had looked when she left, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 3 days after the cookie incident, that's what Brittany calls it now, my phone starts buzzing at like 11:00 p.m. It's a number I haven't seen in months. My former brother-in-law, Mike. Now, some backstory. Mike and I used to be really tight. Like, we'd go to football games together, grab coffee after work, that kind of thing. But when the divorce happened, he blocked me everywhere without even a goodbye. That stung more than I'd like to admit. So seeing his number pop up was weird. I wish I could say I was mature about it. But the first thing out of my mouth was, "Oh, so you remember how to use a phone?" He ignored the sass and jumped straight into this clearly rehearsed speech about how I needed to do the right thing and help his sister out. Kept going on about how she was family for 4 years, how I owed her this one thing, blah, blah, blah. The whole time I'm thinking, where was this family loyalty when she was serving me divorce papers over breakfast? But then he drops this bomb. Man, if roles were reversed, she would have helped you out, no questions asked. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Like full-on snorted. Because are we talking about the same person? The woman who wouldn't even tell me why she wanted a divorce? Who disappeared without a trace? Who showed up at my door and insulted my new girlfriend? That's who would have helped me out. I told him exactly what I told her. I sold the stuff, gave some to charity. End of story. He didn't like that answer. Started getting all aggressive, saying stuff like, "You're not the person I thought you were, and I can't believe I was ever friends with someone like you." That's when I snapped. I told him that maybe he should ask his sister about all the expensive stuff I gave her, including the car she's still driving around in. Asked him if she'd told him about showing up at my house and insulting my girlfriend. Real curious if she'd mentioned disappearing for 5 months without a word to anyone. He got quiet for a second, and I could tell some of this was news to him. But instead of actually thinking about what I was saying, he doubled down. Started calling me selfish, said I was being petty, told me I was just bitter about the divorce. Here's the thing that really gets me, though, throughout this whole conversation. He kept dancing around something. Like there was clearly more to the story that he wasn't telling me. Every time I pushed back on why she needed the money so badly, he'd get all weird and vague about it. I ended up telling him that if his sister needed money so desperately, maybe she shouldn't have quit her six-figure job and disappeared for months. That shut him up pretty quick. Then I hit him with the real kicker. Told him that his sister wasn't worth staying married to. But at least I thought our friendship had been real. Guess I was wrong about that too. Hung up after that. Blocked his number too. Because why not? Everyone else in that family had blocked me months ago anyway. Might as well return the favor. Brittany was staying over that night. She stays over most nights now. Another thing that probably pissed off my ex. And she could tell something was up. Instead of pushing me to talk about it though, she just put on our comfort show and ordered late-night pizza. This girl, I swear, she just gets it. But lying there that night, while Brittany was asleep next to me, I couldn't stop thinking about how weird this all was. My ex disappears for months, then shows up demanding money. Her brother, who hasn't spoken to me since the divorce, suddenly calls to guilt-trip me about helping her. None of it added up. I mean, what kind of trouble was she in that she needed money this badly? And why didn't she just sell the car I bought her if she was that desperate? That thing was worth way more than the jewelry she gave me. Less than 24 hours after the drama with Mike, I get this text from my ex at 4:00 a.m. Who texts at 4:00 a.m. unless something's seriously wrong, right? It was this long paragraph about how she needed to meet me one last time. Said she'd tell me everything, the whole truth this time. My first instinct was to ignore it. I mean, I was done with the drama. Plus, Brittany and I had plans that day to go to this cute little farmer's market. But something about that text felt different from her usual demanding messages. Maybe it was the timestamp. Maybe it was the way she wrote it, but it felt desperate. I showed it to Brittany over breakfast. She stays over most nights now. Has basically taken over half my closet with her colorful scrubs. You know what she said? Babe, you need closure. Go hear her out. Then she kissed my cheek and said she'd go to the farmer's market with her sister instead. Sometimes I wonder what I did to deserve someone this understanding. So I agreed to meet my ex. Told her to come to this coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory, plus it's always busy, so she couldn't make a scene. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept in days. Gone was the power suit-wearing career woman I'd married. She was wearing sweats and looked like she'd been crying. A lot. She sat down and for a minute just stared at her hands. Then she started talking. And holy, you guys are not going to believe this. Turns out she'd been cheating. But not just any regular cheating. She'd been having an affair with someone she met at her high school reunion. Remember that reunion she insisted on going to alone about 6 months into our marriage? Yeah! Connected with some guy she used to date back in the day, and apparently they had this incredible connection or whatever. But here's where it gets really wild. After the divorce, they decided to go all in on their dream life. This dude had convinced her they should buy wait for it, a farm. A farm, Reddit. My ex-wife, who used to complain if her manicure got messed up, decided to become a farmer. They took all her divorce settlement money and bought this property in another state. I had to stop her there. Wait, I said. You left your 6-figure job to become a farmer? She actually looked embarrassed. Turns out, neither of them knew the first thing about farming. I actually laughed. They had this romantic idea about living off the land or something, but reality hit them hard. They ended up having to hire actual farmers to run the place, which ate through their money fast. But wait, it gets better. Remember how she was so desperate for money? Well, turns out she's pregnant with Farm Boy's baby. They burned through all their savings trying to keep the farm running, and now they're broke, with a baby on the way. That's why she came back. She needed money for medical bills and baby stuff. I sat there for a good minute just processing all this. The woman who'd refused to get a dog because it was too much responsibility was having a baby with a wannabe farmer she'd known for barely a year. The whole thing was so absurd, I actually started laughing. She didn't appreciate that. Started crying, saying she knew she'd messed up, that she'd made a huge mistake. Said she'd been too embarrassed to tell anyone where she really was, which is why she cut contact with everyone. Her family knew some of it, but not the whole story, especially not about how badly the farm was failing. Then she hit me with it. She actually asked if I'd consider giving her another chance. Said she'd realized what a mistake she'd made, that farm boy wasn't who she thought he was, that she missed our life together. I looked at her sitting there, crying in a coffee shop, pregnant with another man's baby, asking me to take her back, and felt nothing. Actually, that's not true. I felt grateful. Grateful that she'd served me those divorce papers. Grateful that she'd shown her true colors. Grateful for every red flag that had made me protect myself financially. Most of all, I felt grateful for Brittany. Sweet, kind, drama-free Brittany, who was probably at the farmer's market right now, texting me pictures of puppies she saw and buying way too many succulents. I told my exactly that. Told her that her poor life choices weren't my problem anymore. That she gave up any right to my help when she cheated, when she lied, when she tried to manipulate me. The look on her face when I mentioned the cheating? Priceless. Guess she didn't think I'd figured that part out. She tried to argue. Started saying something about how we'd been together for 4 years, how she still cared about me. I cut her off. Told her I had to go. I needed to go buy some succulents for my girlfriend. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt lighter somehow, like the last piece of a puzzle had finally fallen into place. Everything made sense now. The weird behavior before the divorce, the quick disappearance, the desperate return. But something told me this still wasn't over. My ex isn't the type to just accept defeat and walk away. Called it. She wasn't done. 2 days after our coffee shop chat, she showed up at my house again. This time, Brittany wasn't there. Night shift at the hospital, which was probably for the best considering what went down. My ex was in full meltdown mode. Started banging on my door at midnight, yelling about how I owed her, how I was being selfish, how I had no right to judge her life choices. The neighbors probably got quite a show. I opened the door, mostly to stop the banging, and she just barged in, still ranting. That's when I'd had enough. 4 years together, and I'd never raised my voice at her. But this time, I lost it. Told her exactly what I thought about her cheating, about her running off to play farmer with her high school sweetheart, about her showing up here demanding money like she was entitled to it. Reminded her that she was the one who wanted the divorce. She was the one who disappeared, and she was the one who made her bed. Now she could lie in it. She tried to pull the pregnancy card again, started crying about medical bills and baby expenses. I just laughed and told her maybe she should sell that car I bought her. You know, the one she conveniently forgot about when asking for her gifts back. That's when she went nuclear. Started calling me every name in the book. Said I was heartless. Said she'd make me regret this. I grabbed my phone and told her if she didn't leave immediately, I was calling the cops. She thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. Started dialing right in front of her. You should have seen how fast she changed her tune when she heard the first ring. As she was leaving, more like storming out, she turned around and said something that actually made me laugh. I hope you and Barbie are very happy together. I just smiled and said, we are. Slammed the door. Blocked her number. Then I texted Brittany, who was on her break, about what happened. Her response? Want me to bring home donuts after my shift? Sugar makes everything better. And you know what? She was right. Not just about the donuts, but about everything being better. Better than it ever was with my ex. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting happy. Life has been peaceful. Blissfully, wonderfully peaceful. Brittany and I are thriving. We adopted a rescue dog named Captain because of his one floppy ear that makes him look like he's wearing a tiny pirate hat. We've explored new hiking trails, experimented with some truly disastrous but hilarious recipes, and generally built a life that feels right. Months have passed since my ex's midnight meltdown. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. Part of me almost feels guilty for how good things are, knowing the situation she's in. Almost, but there's still this nagging feeling, a tiny seed of unease that I can't quite shake. It's not that I'm worried about her showing up again. I have security cameras now, a very large, very vocal German Shepherd captain's best friend, and a restraining order in place. It's more. A lingering question. I still don't fully understand why. Why did she marry me in the first place? If she was still hung up on some guy from high school, why did she wait so long to pull the trigger on the divorce? Why all the secrecy, the financial probing, the disappearing act? Was it just about running off to live some romanticized farm life? Was it about the money? Was it just pure, unadulterated boredom? I sometimes find myself late at night, scrolling through old photos, pictures from our wedding, from our vacations, from all those seemingly happy moments, and I search for clues, for any sign that this was all a facade, but I don't see anything. Maybe I'm just overthinking it? Maybe there's no grand conspiracy, no hidden motive. Maybe she was just a deeply unhappy person who made a series of terrible decisions. But then I remember something Mike said during that bizarre phone call. If the roles were reversed, she would have helped you out. No questions asked. That line sticks with me. It implies that he knew something I didn't, that there was some unspoken expectation, some hidden arrangement that I was never privy to. And that's what keeps me up at night. The feeling that there's a missing piece to this puzzle, a piece that would finally explain everything. A week ago, I received a letter. No return address, just my name and address typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of Evelyn, standing in front of a dilapidated barn, holding a baby. She looks tired, defeated, but there's also a flicker of defiance in her eyes. On the back of the photo, a single word was scrawled in messy handwriting. Sorry. I don't know who sent it. I don't know what it means. And honestly, I don't know if I want to know. But it's a reminder that even though I've moved on, even though I've found happiness, the past can still reach out and touch you. And sometimes the questions are more haunting than the answers. The photo haunted me. It sat on my desk, a silent accusation, a constant reminder of the chaos I'd tried so hard to leave behind. Brittany, ever perceptive, noticed my preoccupation. You okay, babe? She asked one evening as I stared at the picture, lost in thought. You've been distant. I hesitated. I didn't want to burden her with this. She deserved a life free from the drama of my past. But I knew I couldn't keep it from her. Not really. I explained about the letter, about the photo, about the lingering questions that plagued me. I told her about Mike's cryptic comment, about my inability to fully let go. Brittany listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. When I finished, she took my hand and squeezed it tight. Liam, she said softly, you deserve to have peace of mind. If you need to figure this out, then you need to figure it out. I'm here for you, whatever you decide. Her unwavering support gave me the courage to do what I'd been resisting for so long. I decided to dig deeper. My first call was to a private investigator. I know, it sounds cliché, like something out of a bad detective novel, but I needed someone with the resources and the skills to uncover information that I couldn't access on my own. I gave him the photo, the limited information I had about the farm I remembered Evelyn mentioning the state it was in, and a list of my questions. I asked him to find out who sent the letter, what was really going on with the farm, and if he could, to shed some light on Mike's comment. The PI, a gruff but professional man named Miller, warned me that it could take time and that there were no guarantees. I told him I understood and that I was prepared to wait. While Miller was working on his investigation, I decided to reach out to someone else, an old friend of mine, David, who works as a forensic accountant. I knew David could help me analyze Evelyn's financial records from before the divorce, looking for any hidden transactions, any unexplained sources of income, anything that might shed light on her motivations. I explained the situation to David, emphasizing the need for discretion. He agreed to help, promising to keep everything confidential. Weeks turned into months. I tried to focus on my work, on my relationship with Brittany, on building a normal life, but the questions lingered, casting a shadow over everything. Finally, the call came. It was Miller. He had some information. We met at a discreet location, a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town. Miller slid a thick file across the table. "I think you'll find this interesting," he said, his voice low. I opened the file and began to read. And what I discovered was more shocking, more disturbing than anything I could have imagined. The file contained a detailed report on Evelyn's activities in the months leading up to the divorce, as well as information about the farm and her current situation. But the real bombshell was buried deep within the financial records. Miller had uncovered a series of large, undocumented transfers from Evelyn's accounts to an offshore account in the months before she served me with the divorce papers. These transfers totaled a significant sum, far more than she received in the divorce settlement. "Where did this money come from?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That's the interesting part," Miller said, leaning forward. "It appears to have originated from a trust fund set up by your father years ago." My father? He'd passed away when I was a teenager. I knew he'd left me a small inheritance, but I had no idea there was a trust fund involved. Miller explained that the trust fund had been managed by a family lawyer, and that Evelyn had somehow gained access to it. He suspected she'd forged my signature, or used some other means to siphon off the money. But why? What did she need the money for? The answer, it turned out, was connected to the farm. The PI's investigation revealed that the farm wasn't just a naive attempt at a romantic life. It was a front for a money laundering operation. Evelyn's high school sweetheart, the farm boy, was actually a low-level player in a criminal organization. He'd convinced her to invest in the farm, promising her a share of the profits. But the profits weren't coming from farming. They were coming from illegal activities. The plan was for Evelyn to use her financial knowledge and her access to my father's trust fund to funnel money through the farm, cleaning it before it reached the criminal organization. But the plan had gone wrong. The farm was losing money, the criminal organization was getting impatient, and Evelyn was pregnant and desperate. That's why she'd come back to me, hoping to get her hands on more money to appease her criminal associates. The photo she sent was a message, a plea for help. But it was also a threat, a reminder that she knew my secrets and that she was willing to use them against me. I sat there, stunned, trying to process the information. My wife, the woman I thought I knew and loved, was a criminal, a liar and a thief, and I had been her unwitting accomplice. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Miller revealed that he'd uncovered evidence suggesting that Evelyn wasn't working alone. He believed that someone else was involved, someone who had been pulling the strings all along, and that someone was Mike, her brother, my former friend. Miller's report detailed a series of phone calls and meetings between Evelyn and Mike in the months leading up to the divorce. He'd also found evidence of financial transactions between them, suggesting that Mike was receiving a cut of the money she was laundering. It turned out that Mike was deeply in debt, struggling with a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control. He'd seen Evelyn's marriage to me as an opportunity to solve his financial problems. He'd convinced her to target my father's trust fund, promising her a share of the money in exchange for her help. He'd manipulated her, played on her insecurities, and exploited her desire for a more exciting life. He'd been the one feeding her information, guiding her decisions, and orchestrating the entire scheme. The divorce, the disappearing act, the desperate return, it was all part of Mike's plan. He'd needed Evelyn to get the divorce so she could access the money without raising suspicion. He'd needed her to disappear so she could launder the money through the farm. And he'd needed her to come back to me when things went wrong, hoping I would unknowingly provide the funds to save their operation. I felt a surge of anger, a burning rage that threatened to consume me. Mike, the man I'd considered a friend, had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable. He'd used my marriage, my trust, and my family's legacy to line his own pockets. But beneath the anger, there was a sense of clarity. Everything finally made sense. The cryptic comments, the weird behavior, the nagging feeling that something was amiss, it all pointed to Mike. I realized that I couldn't let him get away with this. I had to expose him, to bring him to justice for what he'd done. I decided to go to the police. I gathered all the evidence I had, Miller's report, David's financial analysis, and my own recollections of the events leading up to the divorce, and presented it to the authorities. The police were skeptical at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. They launched an investigation, focusing on Mike and Evelyn's financial activities and their connections to the criminal organization. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation intensified. The police interviewed Mike, Evelyn, and several other individuals who were suspected of being involved in the scheme. Finally, the day came when Mike was arrested. He was charged with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Evelyn was also arrested, facing similar charges. As I watched the news reports of their arrests, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The truth was finally out, and the people who had wronged me were being held accountable. But I knew that the legal process would be long and arduous. And I knew that even if Mike and Evelyn were convicted, it wouldn't erase the pain and the betrayal I had experienced. The trial was a grueling affair. The details of Evelyn and Mike's scheme were laid bare for the world to see. The media had a field day, sensationalizing the story of the betrayed husband, the scheming wife, and the gambling-addicted brother. It was emotionally draining to relive the events of the past few years, to confront the lies and the betrayal that had shattered my life. But I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for Brittany. Brittany was my rock throughout the entire ordeal. She attended the trial with me, offering her unwavering support. She held my hand when I felt like I was going to break, and she reminded me of the good things in my life when I felt overwhelmed by the darkness. The trial lasted for weeks. In the end, both Mike and Evelyn were found guilty. Mike received a longer sentence due to his role as the mastermind of the scheme. Evelyn's sentence was lighter, taking into account her cooperation with the authorities and her status as a new mother. While their convictions brought a sense of closure, they didn't erase the scars of the past. I still struggled with trust issues, with the fear that someone I cared about could betray me again. But with Brittany's help, I began to heal. I started therapy, working through my feelings of anger, betrayal, and grief. I learned to forgive myself for being so naive, for trusting the wrong people. I also focused on building a stronger, more authentic relationship with Brittany. We communicated openly and honestly, sharing our fears and our dreams. We created new memories, filling our lives with love, laughter, and joy. We adopted another rescue dog, a sweet, gentle golden retriever named Hope. Captain and Hope became fast friends, running and playing together in our backyard. We also decided to start a family. After everything I'd been through, the thought of bringing a child into the world filled me with both excitement and trepidation. But Brittany reassured me that we were ready, that we could create a loving and stable home for a child. A year later, our daughter, Lily, was born. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt a sense of overwhelming love and gratitude. All the pain and the darkness of the past seemed to fade away, replaced by the pure, unadulterated joy of fatherhood. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that I wouldn't be where I am today without the challenges I faced. The betrayal and the heartbreak forced me to grow, to become stronger, and to appreciate the things that truly matter in life: love, family, and friendship. I learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unexpected places. As for Evelyn and Mike, I haven't spoken to them since the trial. I don't know what their lives are like now, and I don't want to know. I've moved on, and I'm determined to never look back. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned, for the love I've found, and for the beautiful life I'm building with Brittany and Lily. And I know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, we'll face them together with strength, courage, and unwavering love.